you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre, McGuire, and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche And after 22 years, Raymond Mark!
The sickest NHL podcast. It's gonna be.
And welcome to another edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network, and to all our Canadian viewers and listeners, a happy Thanksgiving to you. And I also want to send a beloved happy birthday out to our good friend Jason Logan, who's a regular here in the comment section and one of my good friends up in Montreal. Happy birthday to you, Jay. Hope you're enjoying the day. Pierre, how are you, my friend?
Excellent. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody north of the border, including my mother. Good happy Thanksgiving, Mom.
Happy Thanksgiving, Sally. There we go. And Pierre McGuire, Jimmy Murphy here after a pretty eventful hockey weekend. Pierre, some games on the slate today, some matinees. I know we were both watching the Bruins and the Panthers, and I was keeping a side eye on the defensive struggle up in Ottawa. Really tight defensive game there, huh? 8-7. The Kings come away with a win there. And, of course, Linus Ullmark injured, did not play. They had to call up your guy Sogard there, but then Forsberg leaves with an injury. All of a sudden, goaltending is an issue in Ottawa again, Pierre.
Well, it was today for sure. and it probably was a little bit on Saturday night in Montreal.
Yep.
All that being said, I'm happy for Josh Norris. You know, I've known Josh a long time. He was originally drafted by San Jose. He was part of the Carlson deal. Most people thought when he was at University of Michigan, he was a third-line player. He gets to Ottawa and, you know, give DJ Smith, who was an assistant coach for LA, by the way, give DJ Smith and Davis Payne and Jack Capuano, that coaching staff in Ottawa, a lot of credit. They developed Josh Norris into a top two-line player, and he obviously gets a game-winning goal tonight, and he's tremendous on their power play. So good for Josh. I'm happy for him, especially when you consider the trials and tribulations he's had with his shoulder. I'm really, really happy with the kid. Yeah,
he's a great guy. And the other guy, too, that was part of that young core, Drake Batherson, had a 3-point night as well, Pierre. So that's good to see those young guys stepping up. But obviously, they're going to need tighten up defensively and need some more saves there. The Kings, look, yes, they lost, but they came away with another point. So far, I'd say a pretty good road trip for them, Pierre.
It's good. I mean, it could be better, obviously, but good enough. They're getting points. And Kopitar, you know, he's like the ageless wonder. He just doesn't go away when you think about where he was drafted in the 05 draft and where he is right now as a two-time Stanley Cup winner. Most of the guys he won those cups with, they're gone. The LA Kings, oh, Jimmy, I will tell you, I've watched every game on their road trip. They're not nearly the same team without Drew Doughty. They are not even close to the same team without Drew Doughty. And you know, we all talk about all these different things and trends going around the league. I'll just tell you right now, the Doughty injury is not getting nearly enough attention. Not nearly enough.
No, and I think that's because, Pierre, for the first few games, they seem to be able to overcome it a bit. But in this game, obviously, it was exposed tremendously. So, they're going to have to deal with that. It's just the way it is. We'll see what happens if eventually they have to make a move or not. Just around from the weekend that was, Pierre, anything that kind of, caught your attention that you've been digesting or kind of going over?
Yeah, Dallas back-to-back shutouts. You got to give a lot of credit to the way Pete DeBoer's coaching. 3-0 over the Islanders, 2-0 over Seattle last night. Jake Ottinger was real good against the Islanders. Casey DeSmith. How many times have I talked to Jimmy about Casey DeSmith and how much they're going to miss him in Vancouver? He's down there. He's working on $1 million a year deal. He signed for 3 years at $1 million a year. That's an example of a team doing their scouting and understanding what Casey can bring to the party. And so Dallas, back-to-back shutouts, they're undefeated so far this year. They were one of our picks, you and I, to be an elite team and obviously compete for the cup. I think they're well on their way to doing that. And the other thing that really stood out to me, Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. And Winnipeg, to me right now, we talked about Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton making a difference. Scheifele's making a difference. But if you were to do the first 3 games for most teams, and I know some have only played 1, some have played 2, Kyle Connor right now, and again, they're not a high-profile team. I get it. People don't watch them. Kyle Connor right now is as good as any player in the league offensively. Yep. He's as good as any player in the league offensively.
Yeah, and, as he goes, so I think the Jets go as well. Obviously, they have one of the best goalies, but up front, they need him to do what he's doing right now. Pierre, another thing I saw, compliments of NHL media and their stats that they email to us every day. An interesting stat here. So far, heading into game action today, there were 20 come from behind wins, which was exactly half of the amount of games played to this point up until face-off today, which is pretty interesting. I wonder, what do you attribute that to?
Well, the offense definitely has an advantage over the defense, which usually it's the other way around, especially in football. You
Mhm.
know, as we celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving, the CFL has a traditional game in Montreal every year, which when I was a little boy, I used to go to all the time with my dad and my brothers. And then we'd go home and have turkey. But yeah, no, it's a little different this year in the NHL. The defense does not have the advantage over the offense, and I think part of that is just the off-season training that a lot of these players are doing, Jimmy, and the skill development that's gone on around the league. It's probably been since I'm going to say since '05, '04, '05. You know, we had the nuclear winter, we had no hockey, and guys were
Mhm.
trying to figure out what do I do to stay sharp? What do I do to stay better? And I think that was kind of the advent of a lot of the skill development. I know there was always power skating and there was all this other stuff, but the sticks have changed, the equipment's better, the conditioning levels are better. So I think at the start of every year, the offense now has a little bit of an advantage over the defense, which you wouldn't have said 20 years ago. You would not have said that.
I'll tell you, Pierre, we'll be up on rg.org tomorrow. I had a one-on-one with NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, as I told you off air, and he
Yep.
was great and gave me some really good stuff. And one of the things I asked him, Pierre, and it connects to this, was, did you envision the league bouncing back as fast as it did from COVID? Yes, it took a few years, but still, the attendance was good. He said it was better than they expected. And one of the things he attributed it to was exactly everything you just spoke about there, and just the amount of skill coming into the league, the youth, the excitement that it's bringing. And he said, you know, without those players doing what they're doing right now, and the way they seem to be getting better every year, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So he's just thrilled with the talent level and the excitement that's surrounding the NHL right now.
Well, Bill's spot on with that. And I would just tell you, you look at it, we used to, when we had Gretzky and Lemieux in the league, and that's when I was coaching, that was the prime of my career. Other guys were good. You know, Sakic was good for us. We had a lot of guys. Nieuwendyk was good. There were a lot of Broughton was good. Madonna was, there were a lot of guys coming in. But now we have this surplus of players. So when Gretzky and Lemieux went out, you had Crosby, you had Ovechkin. So, you know, those guys. So you have the '03 draft, you have the '02 draft, and then all of a sudden it starts to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it starts to go. The '03 draft was, I think, the thing that really helped stimulate this whole. You go look at that. There's still a lot of guys playing.
Yeah.
You know, Joe Pavelski just retired, 205th in the 2003 draft. 205th was his draft position. You know, Shea Weber was a second round pick. Patrice Bergeron was a second round pick. You start
Yep.
looking at Corey Perry's still playing. He took
Yep.
the innocuous penalty last night for goalie interference. By the way, and I know we have Brian Wilde coming on.
Yep.
I'm going to be totally transparent. I told Jimmy we got to get Brian Wilde on. He's one of my favorite guys to talk hockey with. He gets it. He's really good in the Montreal area in particular. But you know, Jimmy, you asked me one of the things that stands out. Ryan Huska. I wonder how many guys around hockey, all the pundits, how many
Mhm.
guys are going to pat Ryan Huska on the back, the head coach of the Calgary Flames, say 2 challenges in Edmonton against the Oilers, a team that's really struggling. They're 0-3 now. They were 0-2
Mhm.
going into that game.
Glad you
He
brought
gets
this up.
he gets both challenges right. One was a goalie interference. One was an offside. If
Yep.
they don't win those challenges, they're down 3-0 and probably more because Edmonton's going to steamroll them. And
Yep.
they don't. And all of a sudden, the coach that makes these decisions gets no. I don't see any credit going to that guy.
I know. Nobody's talking about them. 3-0 right now, the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, and so like to me, Ryan Huska's done an amazing job there. He did it. We talked about it last year.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we're not front running. You know, he didn't have much to work with last year. I thought he did a real good job with that team, and I'm glad that Craig Conroy said, you know what, he did a good job. He deserves more of a leash,
Yeah.
and I
And
think he's
Pierre,
doing a really good job there. But if I'm just going to tell you this, and I know we'll get into it later. I want to give credit where credit's due, and Brian Wilde, it's perfect that he's on today because he does it the same way.
yep.
You got to give credit where credit's due to Mark Spector.
Yes.
Mark Spector's calling it the way it is in Edmonton.
In
And
Edmonton.
Jimmy, I don't like plagiarizing stuff, and so I'm going to give him full credit. But I know I talked to you about it before.
Mhm.
the Edmonton Oilers, and people can say whatever they want about all their offense. Okay, good for you guys. You score a lot. Until your star players commit themselves defensively, and I can tell you, go watch the tape. Go watch the tape from last night. I dare anybody to watch. Go watch that tape and tell me how great those star players were defensively. I dare you to watch it and tell me how good they were. Okay? Until those guys commit, and I'm talking about Draisaitl, I'm talking about McDavid, I'm talking about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I'm talking about one of my favorites, Zach Hyman. Watch one of the goals last night, Zach Hyman, swing and a miss.
Yep.
I'm just telling you, until those guys, Jimmy, decide they want to play team defense and stop poaching offensively, they're never winning.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, they'll never win.
Pierre, I'm with you. And going back to Spector, I mean, his job is to report what he sees and to give an educated opinion on what he's seeing. And that's not always going to be the rosy picture that fans or the team want. But he's just telling the truth. He's telling, like you said, he's telling like it is. So good on him for doing that. And he was saying in the preseason, and people were telling him he was overreacting. He says this team's getting high on themselves. They're reading all the clippings, they're reading all the previews, and all the people predicting they're going to win the cup. And you said it too early on. And look at it now. And so they're going to have to reel that in fast. They can't afford to have another start like they did last year, because you just can't come back from that. You can't do that every year. You just can't.
No, and not only that, like, think about it now, because you're spot on. You talked about LA, so I'll give you credit on that one. Colorado's off to a shaky start. They play the Islanders tonight. I think they'll get out of their shaky start tonight. And then you look like Winnipeg. They're doing better than a lot of people thought. I know it's early. I get it. But trust me, I totally get it. Nashville's got to have a better start. They haven't played well. They just got shut out in Detroit. So just start looking at it. A lot of these teams where there were huge expectations, Vegas is playing great.
They are.
They're playing. And by the way, Jimmy, here's another thing. When you have a power play that's got Jack Eichel, Thomas Hertl, Victor Olofsson, Mark Stone on, you put a defenseman on, Shea Theodore. Like, come on.
I know.
They're just going to – I'm telling you, you can't take penalties against that. That's too many easy minutes for those guys.
Yep.
It's too many easy minutes.
And Pierre, people were down on that team coming into the season. People were like, Vegas is they're on the way out.
This is why I'm so glad we have Brian on, because I know he watches games. And we got a lot of people now, Jimmy, because of this internet stuff, that only look at box scores and highlights. They don't watch games.
Yep.
And I hate to be negative on Thanksgiving, and I hate to be negative on Indigenous Persons Day in the United States. I'm just telling you, if you see guys that are just writing numbers and aren't doing anything else, they're not watching games.
Yep.
Don't read them.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
I know.
Because you're going to get a totally false view of what this league's about right now.
Yep. I'm with you on that. And we were talking about Bill Daly and how grateful he is for all the talented young players coming in the league. Well, a young player, Pierre, that you were telling us about last year when he was at Boston University, to get ready for him. And he has delivered so far. It's early yet, but so far he has come as advertised. That's Montreal Canadiens rookie defenseman Lane Hutson. And on to discuss Hutson and the Canadiens with us right now is our good friend Brian Wilde from Global TV. And also you see him right here on the Sick Podcast Network when he goes on with Tony Marinaro a lot. Good to have you, Mr. Wilde. It's been a while. Before we were coming on, I was trying to find, there was a great picture of you, Frankie Gagnon, and myself at TD Garden back in 2014 in the Bruins Canadiens second round series. I have it somewhere in my Facebook. I'll find it and send it to you. But we looked a lot younger then. You still look pretty good, but I don't know about me.
And we were on a lot too at the Bell Center, of course, Frankie as well, during the heydays on CTV when the industry was expanding beautifully. Changed time since then for sure. But yeah, we've had a lot of great moments together, Murph. And of course, you too, Pierre. You were always with me on the Habs this week, remember? Saturday.
Oh, do I ever, with Mitch Melnick.
Yeah.
You and I.
Absolutely. And then I took over from Mitch, and we had some great times. I always loved listening to you talk hockey.
What's great, Brian? Where we used to do it too, down on Crescent Street, was always doing it with Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Oh, really? You did it with Winston Churchill's. Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been fun.
Well, it was challenging sometimes, not the quietest of places, but always fun for sure.
Good stuff. Well, Brian, I mentioned Lane Hutson there. So let's start with him right now. And, I think you know your game. You scout, you look at players coming in and you know that. But could you ever have envisioned the start he's had so far for the Montreal Canadiens and how he has really caught the imagination of that city?
Yeah, it was interesting because I actually caught Pierre when he was talking about Lane Hutson and the chances of making the team before camp broke. And I agreed 100% with everything Pierre said, as much as everybody was super excited about what he could bring. And offensively, he'd obviously been a juggernaut. I was pretty concerned about what he could do defensively. Small guy coming up against big players and how he'd be able to cope with time and space. And I thought, and I said it on the podcast, the Sick podcast as well, I called it 50-50 that he even made the team. And even if the 2 games against Detroit last year were outstanding, where he looked comfortable, it was such a small sample size. I thought, a little bit of apprenticeship in the minor leagues was going to be real good for him, but he just denied everybody that had that in their concept by being just too damn good,
Brian,
too damn good.
Brian, what I love about you is you really take the pulse of the team. And you're straight up and you're forward. No, I mean this because a lot of guys are homeboys and all they care about is waving pom-poms. You don't. And I really respect you for that. I'll tell you that on the record. I really have always respected that about you. You do your work. Have you ever seen the Canadiens fans so excited about a young player in the recent times? I have not.
The last time that they were this excited was Alex Kovalev. Just when a guy got the puck.
And he wasn't a young player then.
No, he was definitely, had come from the Rangers at the time. He was in the twilight of his career, but still had some good seasons left.
Yep.
And when he touched the puck, everybody kind of rose out of their seat and had high expectations that something special was going to happen. And Pierre, that's exactly what's happening right now. I was at the game on Saturday night. I talked to Lane for about 15 minutes after the game, with everyone, of course. Yeah. But when we got right down to it, there was just Arpon Basu and I left at the end of it. And I asked him, what do you like best about the National Hockey League so far, Lane? And you know what he said?
Per diem.
He said, there are so many games. I love how many games there are. I would play over 2 weeks to 3 games. Now I got 3 and 4. We're playing Monday. I mean, he's just loving playing and he's loving getting the chance to play every second night instead of having to wait. And that just shows that, there's a guy that's not nervous about things, can't wait for the next game, doesn't feel overwhelmed, can't wait for the next game, can't wait for the next shift.
Yep.
Love that. Jimmy, I love that. That's so good.
Pierre and I were both saying it the other day that one of his strengths and abilities to overcome his size, Brian, we feel is that he just got that really amazing puck sense and that instinct of knowing where to go next or knowing where the play might be developing, even when he doesn't have the puck. And, when you see players like that, they're special, but it's helped him get out of some jams. You're like, oh, he's really going to pay for the price. And then boom, he's out of it. Have you noticed that as well? Just the way he sees the game?
I think that's been the biggest thing, actually, because everybody's expecting him to just get plowed over. Like even in season 1, Juraj Slavkovsky got plowed over 5 times.
Yep.
Because he didn't have that sense. He'd just be like, I don't know what's going on. He looked left, looked right, wasn't aware, hadn't have very good ice awareness, and he got rocked, couple of concussions. So far, I think that's the most special thing about Lane Hutson. There have been no instances where he hasn't had enough time and space. Yeah. Because he's reading the play before it begins. And then when somebody tries to come at him, he's already made his decision. He's already made his outlet. And he's going to get rocked eventually. It's the National Hockey League. Everybody's going to get rocked. Yeah. And it's going to be a tough moment for him because he's going to be small. But it's not going to be a regular occurrence, and it's not going to be too big a league for him based on the sample size we have so far.
Yeah, I asked Brady Tkachuk the other night when he tried to corral him in the offensive zone and BU on BU. Brady's a BU guy. His dad's a BU guy. And there's Lane doing a tap dance on Big Brady who tried to outmuscle him. Lane's like, buzz off, pal.
The head stuff was great, though, when they were mimicking each other.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that mimicking each other part there where Lane was behind the net? I think the most salient part about that, and I didn't see it in any of the replies to the moment when they put him on Twitter, but the most salient part was check the clock and the score. Yeah. It's 4-1. Lane Hutson doesn't need that game to progress at a fast rate. Exactly. If Brady wants to stand there for 7 minutes, Lane will stand there for 7 minutes, and we can just end this thing at 4-1. Lane knows what he's doing there.
Yeah.
Jimmy, now you understand why I should get Brian on?
Yep. Exactly.
That's kind. Thank you,
That's a
Pierre.
guy that's watching the game and he gets it.
Yeah. It's true. Brian, look at the way too. You're in the locker room now. You're there at the games. How have his teammates embraced him? What's been the reaction from the teammates so far?
Well, hey, it's the National Hockey League. You bring a great player and doing great things. They're pretty happy, but at the same time, though, I do want to make a point about hierarchy. Like the fans are really clamoring for him to take over the first power play unit from the one defender, which is Mike Matheson. But at the same time, guys, there's hierarchy, and fans want that hierarchy to just be completely ignored. But that's not the way it works. He'll get there eventually if he continues to be outstanding. But for now, Matheson had an outstanding last year. He's getting a ton of ice time this year, and be patient on that front. It'll come. Come.
I'm one of those guys that's pushing for that. So I'm going to listen to the voice of reason that I think Brian Wilde is, and I will cede him that point. And somebody that I really respect, Stu Hackle, he watched the Montreal Canadiens in the 50s and the 60s, and he said to me, Pierre, come on, go back in your Rolodex. Toe Blake did the same thing to Yvon Cornway back in the 1960s.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I was younger, but I do remember that because there was a bit of an outcry in the city that everybody wanted Cornway on the power play. And to Brian's point, Jimmy, Toe Blake made Cornway wait because there was a hierarchy. There was a toll that had to be paid. And eventually it obviously was off in the Hall of Fame career. So I agree with Brian on that. But I'm going to tell you, I love Michael Matheson. I really do as a person and as a player. I respect him a ton. But it's time.
Pierre, let me ask you a question as somebody that's, obviously been in locker rooms in the National Hockey League. I mentioned a point about hierarchy just now, thinking that the players amongst themselves go through that process. And that's why, even though we can all see the better player, I agree with you, Pierre, is Lane Hutson, because Mike Matheson, as a defensive point guy in the power play, is very predictable. He does what most of them do. He either takes the shot or sends it to the half wall. Yep. Whereas Lane Hutson beats guys one-on-one, confuses everybody, breaks down lanes, and suddenly everybody's forgot their defensive scheme and he's created something. So on the ice, I completely agree with you that it should be now. But the hierarchy, I got to ask you, like how much of a process and how long does the process take for an actual NHL player to say, okay, I'm ready for Mike Matheson to cede his position to Lane Hutson?
You know what? I think it depends on the team and the leadership of the team and where the coach is. It's a great question. So I'll give you an example from NHL lore. When Sidney Crosby played after his first year, everybody in Pittsburgh knew he's the best player. He's the captain of our team. He's the face of the franchise. There's no question. So what they do, remember when everybody says he's 19 years old, how can he be the captain of this team?
Right.
Well, it turned out to be the right decision because they go to the Stanley Cup final in 08. They go to the final and win in 09. They go to in 16 and 17, they win again. There's one thing that's been consistent since Crosby's been in Pittsburgh, except for the last 2 years. They've been in the playoffs every year except for the last two. And it's not Sid's fault. But so I guess that would be my point. It took a year for them to put Crosby in as captain. I think when it comes to a relevant thing on the ice, Brian, I'm not sure it takes as long.
Yeah. What
would you predict, Pierre? 20 games?
I'm going to say 15 to 20 because more times than not, coaches know the team they have by game 15.
Right.
They're never going to say that publicly, but I'm going to be a good defensive team or I'm going to be a good offensive team or we got a juggernaut. You're going to know what you got by 15 games. So I would say 15 to 20 is fair.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the bottom line is winning.
Yeah.
We can't wait too long. You got to go to the guy who can give you results.
Just so, Brian, so like Jimmy and I have these talks. We talk all the time. And one of the things I try to tell him is if you go through a 10-game segment at the beginning of the year, so there's 2 10-game segments by U.S. Thanksgiving, okay? If you go through 20 games, and you don't have at least half the amount of points you should have, so let's say 20 points, you're not making the playoffs. Right. You can go look at it. It's unbelievable when you break the numbers down that way. It's scary. So if you have a bad 10-game segment and you're a marginal team, chances are not good for you to make the playoffs.
Especially in the Eastern Conference and the Atlantic Division with all these teams.
Atlantic's painful.
You know,
watch Florida. Florida today without Kachuk, And without Sasha
That's a win.
Barkov going to Boston, they were down 1-0. You see the way they played the last 15 minutes of that game? They were playing a Game 7 playoff game. That's what they were doing because they know they got to get these points.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're off to kind of a meandering start.
Yep, for sure. Pierre, I want to ask, going back to what Brian was saying, when you're the coach, how does that conversation go with the veteran when you have to tell him, look, I got to move you down the ladder here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's no disrespect to you, but how would you handle it?
Respectfully, because of the player and that we're talking about, Mike Matheson.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen Scotty have this conversation with Paul Coffey in our dressing room in Pittsburgh. I've seen Bob Johnson have this discussion with Brian Trottier in Pittsburgh, 2 Hall of Fame guys, Coffey and Trottier. You know, I'm saying to Brian, you're going to be a 3rd or 4th line center here, but this is why. And Brian took it, and I mean Brian Trottier and Brian Wilde, you'll appreciate this. He took it and he ran with it. And Brian was such an important part of our 2 cups in 91 and 92. Mm-hmm. And so I would say the number one thing is with respect.
Yep.
And tell the player how important they are and how good they've been and how important they are long-term to the development of our team.
Yeah. And Martin St. Louis is
don't castigate the player. Never.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Martin St. Louis is good at that part, Pierre.
I agree with you, Brian. I think he's been great. Look at, hey, Brian, you're one of the first people I heard that talked about this. And I love that about you. You think about where Cole Caulfield is now.
Mm-hmm.
You think about where Cole Caulfield was before Marty St. Louis, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it
amazing.
God, I'm just sitting here, Pierre, and I didn't even know you heard anything I ever said. This is really wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, no, because I got on this little thing with Jimmy this afternoon because I've been reading some stuff. You know, in between periods, I don't watch the shows. I switch to different games.
And he calls me.
I started reading something, and I called Jimmy. I'm like, I've had it. There are people that I know, and Jimmy knows, that are writing stuff they're not watching games. And I know you watch the games. And I've known that for a long time. So I pay attention to what you say because it matters. It resonates to me because you're a voice of reason in your market. And it's really good. So there you go. Let's get serious now.
It's a long season. It's a long season. And I say that because when you talk about the voice of reason, you got to make sure that you don't fly off the handle when somebody has a bad game or maybe has something on their mind or feels sick or isn't able on a certain night to give it everything. You can't make so much of that one moment that you become, I don't know, irresponsible, really.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Perfect.
Totally perfectly said. I want to go back to that Ottawa-Montreal game there, Brian. And I watched that game. And, you know, I felt like there's been moments in the past 10 years where they had a chance, those 2 teams, to really take off into a fun rivalry. But it's at times it's materialized, but it hasn't quite got there. Do you see that potential there right now for them to finally become an official rivalry, so to speak?
Well, Montreal has to be better for that to happen. I mean, that was the Saturday night.
That was the first time. 9 games?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that was the first time that Montreal was respectful at all against Ottawa for a long, long time. They haven't been good enough team, even though Ottawa has struggled to make the playoffs, obviously, as we all know. So if that's going to happen, there will be Arbor Jacki in the middle. There will be Brady Tkachuk in the middle, and there will be results that our one team can win and the other team can win. Because without that, there's no such thing as a rivalry. As you know, the same thing with Toronto, Montreal. Everybody, it's so great on paper, right? Big Canadian cities, but Montreal's got to win a game or 2, right?
And don't you have to make the playoffs to have a rivalry? Don't you need to play?
Yes,
almost for sure.
Yeah,
it's pretty hard to get excited about a rivalry between 26 and 31 in the league. No question.
Considering how close they are geographically, that would be.
I mean, I can tell you right now, again, like we had a rivalry with the Flyers when I was in Pittsburgh, but we used to pound them so bad because they were bad then. And so and then it kind of went away because we would just destroy them. You know, we were on top of the mountain and they were just starting their climb. And then they drafted Lindros and things started to change, you know, slowly but surely. And I could see the same thing. The Islanders were bad for a long time in New York, really bad. And then Bill Torrey and Al Arbor kind of came up with this, you know, we're going to draft guys from the Western Hockey League. And they did, you know, and they obviously hit a home run with Potvin. And then the Rangers played them in the playoffs. And the Rangers Islanders things are like, but boom, it was cuckoo, But so I think the playoffs matter. Brian, Montreal, young players, Laval. What's your take? Developing the right way? Not playoffs this year? No playoffs? Because I think it's important for a developing team.
The way I feel about the way it's going so far is, everybody's predicting, and Vegas has the number at 76 points for the Canadians, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if they're at 76 points this year, the rebuild isn't going well.
No.
Because who's to arrive still? Demidov, H. I don't think Reinbacher is a game changer. So they essentially have only two players really at this point that are game changers to arrive. So if they're from 75, stay here with 75 with this lot, then they think Demidov and H can take them to 110. Forget it. No two players can take 35 points for you. They're not that great unless they're Gretzky or Lemieux or something like that. So they have to start building on this year. 76 has to turn into 90 this year, or 85 at least. So that number, 85 to 90, can therefore turn into 110 when everyone matures and arrives. And we're in the maturing phase of 90% of the players and the arrival phase of only two other guys to come. So this is a giant year for MSL and Hughes to show that the rebuild is going well because results are happening. And so far, even though they're 2-1, frankly, I really haven't been impressed with the Canadians. They've relied on Montembeault. Other than that, they haven't been very good.
Hey, Jimmy, I think we got to tell Brian about one other guy that's coming. He plays goal for Boston College, and he's really
Fowler.
Yeah, Fowler. So I watched him on Friday night against Michigan State. He had a 3-0 shutout. And Munn Arena now, back in East Lansing, Munn Arena's hopping. They lost their mojo for a long time at Michigan State. It's back now, and that kid's for real. I'm just telling Brian, I recruited and coached a lot of really special players, and I'm so grateful for all those opportunities. I tried to recruit Marty Brodeur when he was 16 years old from St. Leonard. He played for a team called Montreal Bourassa, midget AAA. And he came in and visited with us. And I remember telling my boss at the time, if we get this kid, we'll win the national championship, and then we'll all be golden. We won't have to worry about anything. And Marty got drafted by St. Hyacinthe and ended up going. I talked to a bunch of people about this over the last little while. I haven't seen a goalie play like Marty Brodeur with calm, cool collectiveness and almost a little bit of swagger, unlike Jacob Fowler. Like Fowler's the next guy that I've seen since Brodeur.
So would you say Pierre is the best prospect not in the NHL today in goal?
In goal, I'd say the only other guy would be Augustine at Michigan State. Augustine at Michigan State's really, that was a great matchup, by the way. They played head to head, and they're both going to be part of the World Junior team for the Americans. Fowler won on Friday and Augustine won on Saturday. I'd say those are probably the two best guys outside. Dobish is good, though, by the way. You got a good one in Montreal and Laval. Dobish is good.
Oh, you like him?
Yeah, he's good. Yeah. I mean, he's not as good as Fowler.
No.
Right? He's not as good as Fowler, but he's good. He's got a chance.
And allow me to pick your brain then. What do you think of Primo? Will he be steady? Will he be strong? What do you think?
Kane's probably going to be a backup goalie. I don't see him ever being a starter, a 1A. I thought last year he was trending that way. I'm not sure I see that anymore. I thought if he went on waivers last year, Jimmy and I talked about this, Brian, I thought he'd get picked up by Philadelphia. I don't think that happens anymore because they're so backed up in goal right now. Urson's surprised them, I think, a lot. And they've got, a Russian contingent of goaltenders now in Philly where I don't see him going there. So I see Caden more as a secondary player in the organization rather than the future starter.
You know who's been a little bit disappointing so far this year with the Canadians, and I want to ask again, as somebody that's been in rooms a lot, Pierre, is Kirby Dach, and with major knee construction surgery, you're going to have that, right? But he looks slower to me, and there just doesn't seem to be his ability to transition up the ice right now like he did when he was at his best. Do you think that continues? or is this just part and parcel of either anxiety from getting first back on the ice after reconstructive surgery, or do you think there's a lost a step that can be gained in time when some strength comes back, or is this a different player?
I think strength can be gained. I love what you asked me before about Hutson versus Michael Matheson, and I said 15 to 20 games. I think we're going to know the same thing about Kirby. I think 15 to 20. Timing becomes an issue. And there's 3 different phases in an NHL season. And I think you know this. We've talked about it before. There's the session before the U.S. Thanksgiving break, so the last week of November. Then there's the session just before the All-Star break. And then it's right after the trade deadline, the drag race to the finish. There are 3 different sessions of an NHL season where the tempo goes up. So I think you were going to know on Doc in terms of the speed quotient, probably by 15 to 20 games. And then if he's not fitting in, then he's probably not coming back this year.
Yeah. With the same aplomb as he did before. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Brian,
I'm concerned because I love the player. I absolutely have loved the player. I think he's been underrated. He's been one of those guys that every time I talk about what I love in him, they tell me his point totals, and I think, come on, man, let's get beyond.
He's been
point
hurt a
totals
lot
here.
you know.
Yeah.
And you know what else, Brian and Jimmy? This is something that we talk about mentorship a lot on this show, Brian. And I know you've had great mentors. I've been fortunate to have really good mentors, both on the coaching side and on the broadcast side. Any player that was mentored by Patrick Kane, Brent Seabrook, Corey Crawford, and Jonathan Taves, I know he went to a higher education institute for hockey learning. And that's what Kirby Doc had. I was there when he was 18 years old playing in Chicago. I saw how those guys tried to nurture him. I saw the information that he was processing because I spent so much time in Chicago in those days. So that's one of the things that I loved when they got Doc. He was bringing Stanley Cup intel, even though he wasn't part of it when they were winning, to Montreal that really not a lot of guys in Montreal had.
Yeah, good point.
You know, it's mind readers, Pierre. We don't script this, but one of my questions to Brian was going to be, look, we discussed Matheson on the defense there, and I think with his age and experience and just his wealth of knowledge, he can be a good mentor for Lane Hutson and other young defensemen. Who up front is that guy right now for the Canadians to you, Brian?
That would what?
It would kind of be a mentor for the younger guys. I know you know a lot of the leadership, the letters are on younger players right now, but is there a veteran player that necessarily doesn't have a letter on its jersey, but has emerged or is about to emerge as a mentor, so to speak?
I would say no, actually. They have a lot of leaders for sure. Like Nick Suzuki is really a cerebral guy. And obviously the captain, they understand that they expect that from him. But I wouldn't say anyone is emerging that it hadn't already shown that. So I'm going to answer Nick Suzuki and just assume you didn't use the word emerging. Because he's definitely the most cerebral and a leader and all of those things you look for. Really intelligent player. And his success in the NHL is because of his intelligence. He doesn't bring, when I was young, I was, of course, in Edmonton, and I talked to Glenn Sather about a guy named Jeff Smith. He was a blue liner, and I liked everything Jeff Smith did, and I don't know if you know that name. And he looked at me and said, Brian, to be in the NHL, you got to have one skill that you do amazing, and that's why you find success. And I said, and so what does that say about Jeff Smith? And he said, I think he's going to be an average hockey player. And I'm allowed to say this now, right? But I didn't say it then because I didn't want to go, hey, Jeff, I don't think that Glenn thinks you're going to be anybody. But that's how it went, right? Yeah. So, like when you look at the team now and you look at, the one skill, it's easy to see what Sather was talking about, like Cole Caulfield. There's that one skill, though he's rounded out his game beautifully, compared to what he was, just a shooter. And he's much more of a vibrant player now, but he has that one skill, that goal on Saturday night against the reverse VH. I mean, he didn't even look at the net. He just said, in today's NHL, I got a corner right there. It's over his shoulder, and I'm not even going to look at the net. I'm going to just put it in that spot. And he did it. He put it in that spot. So, and Lane Hutson, just going back to Hutson, he's a guy that is just impossible to take off the puck. And so there's that one skill.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. There are 2 guys there that one is off to a good start, Brendan Gallagher, and another one's off to a not so good start, Josh Anderson. And this is becoming a recurring theme. how's Brendan's attitude being a depth player, and how's Josh's attitude considering he's not playing particularly well?
Yeah, I think their attitudes are pretty good, both of them. I mean, Brendan is just such a gamer, Pierre. I mean, his attitude through his entire career has been outstanding. Even when, I mean, his hand looked like mush, he still had a great attitude that he was going to come back and reinvent himself and still be the same player, relying on a shot less. Josh, they're getting to kill penalties now just to see if they can, invite him to be a part of the game. But I think, like, when we talk about that one skill, it's a really good thing because, Brendan at Gallagher, that one skill was that tenacity, right? And he still has it. He still plays really tenacious. And even though some of the other things have fallen by the wayside, he still brings that tenacity. And I don't think Josh is bringing that one skill he has, is using that size to win pucks, go to the net, get to the middle of the ice, and be a great player from what used to be his Ballywick. And until he gets that back, and I don't know if it's still the high ankle sprain, that's a really serious injury that like Teemu Selanne back in the day, right, Pierre? Mm-hmm. The year after he came back, everybody said, wow, Teemu's washed up. Yeah. And he wasn't.
You know what people forget about that with Teemu? What saved Teemu was a lockout. He had a year to rehab that. And so Brian's spot on. And, I'll never forget because I spent a lot of time in Europe during the lockout. And just talking to Teemu and the rehab he was going through in Finland in particular. And then he comes back and he goes back to Anaheim. And I'll tell you this story, and I hope Timo hears about it. So Gordon Miller and I are doing a playoff series. It's Colorado versus San Jose, and Timo's in Colorado, and Tony Granato's the head coach. And at the old Fairmont Hotel in San Jose, after the game's over, Teemu Selanne grabs my arm. So I'm like, he was a healthy scratch that day. He's really angry. He's demonstrative in the lobby. He's yelling and screaming. I said, not here. Let's just go. There's a bar and a steakhouse there called The Grill. I said, let's go behind the grill. So he said, okay. So we went, and he said, you're friends with Tony Granato? I said, yeah, proudly so. I really like Tony. We're good friends. He goes, this is the first time in my career I've ever been a healthy scratch. This is bull crap. He's screaming and yelling. I said, Timo, I'm going to tell you as your friend, you're hurt, man. Like, you're not, I know you think you're the same player, but you're not the same player. Like, I'm telling you the truth. Oh, I'm ready to play. Well, anyways, we have a lockout. He goes and gets fixed. And I'll never forget, after they win the cup in 2007, Brian and Jimmy interviewing him. And I told Jimmy this story, Brian. Timo starts bawling. And, they beat Ottawa in 5 games. And I almost start bawling. I'm like trying to keep it on the rails there. You're on national TV, you're interviewing a guy, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to lose it because I know what this guy's gone through. Yep, and it's everything in my power to keep it on the rails. But that showed you how hard he worked to get back. So to Brian's point about high ankle sprains and all that, there's a good example. Guys that have bad injuries like that, takes a while for them to come back.
It's funny because we like the mantra these days always is like, oh, modern medicine is so amazing. And it's true. I mean, we're doing great things with modern medicine. Like Bobby Orr had to spend a lot of his career on the rims without tires, so like we're trying to save the meniscus these days instead of just removing it. Yeah. But at the same time, it's still the human body and it still takes time. And then the psychology has to come along with the physicality. And for some players it can take. So I'm not sure that even Josh Anderson, he may say he's fine, but like Teemu, he's probably not the same guy either in his head or his body. And we can see it, right, Pierre? We can see he's not the same guy. We can see he's not the
remember when Matt Cook stepped on Carlson, cut him with his skate? Yeah. How long did that take for him to get back to where he should have been? Took a long time. Yeah, so I agree. Yeah.
Takes her. All right. Final question for you, Brian. That hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight, the Montreal Canadiens, that is. I got a feeling that every time Pittsburgh comes to town, somebody in the media or fans on social media are going to say, will Crosby become a Canadian if he ever again?
That's the final question.
I know he signed his extension, but I don't think that question is going to go away. So I'm just throwing it out there to you.
It's gone away. No, he's going to retire, of course, as a Pittsburgh Penguin because He's had his whole career there. I think he wants to honor that jersey by finishing in that jersey. There was a time, of course, because of his dad, my favorite team is the Montreal Canadiens. But boy, that is a long time ago now. And the answer is he will finish his career as a Pittsburgh Penguin.
I'm with you.
And I'm even going to predict that nobody asks him if he'd like to play for the Montreal Canadiens.
And he'll say in the famous words of Pierre McGuire that I've heard him tell Mitch Melnick, I'm always a Penguin.
yeah.
And he can mean it. So I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Brian, listen, thanks for joining us here. Always a pleasure. It's good to see you, my friend. And I'm actually going to be up in Montreal at the beginning of November, the first weekend in November. So maybe we will cross paths
for the butter chicken.
Yep, I'll be at my favorite place, McLean's, my friend. So hopefully I'll see you there. All right.
Okay, thanks so much for the invite, Pierre and Murph. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You were awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Brian Wilde joining us here on the Eye Test on the Sick Podcast Network. Good call having him on here.
Jimmy.
Yep.
That guy's good, man, at his job.
He is. Good at his job. I learned a lot. I got to work with him for a whole season when I was in Montreal, and he had me on CTV a lot. And him and Frankie Gagne, I've been lucky to have mentors like you. They did the same. And he knows it. And I love how he thinks the game, Pierre. He doesn't just report on it. He actually thinks the game, which I like.
Part of why I think he does, though, like he was in a big market before in Edmonton. People forget.
Exactly.
You cover the Edmonton art. Like my old partner, Gordon Miller, he did the same thing. I'm telling you, people forget, like, because Edmonton, now they're back a little bit, but it was a dead franchise for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The fans were still there. The fans were great, but the team was not great.
Yeah, there were some rough times there for sure. All right, well, let's get over. I know I see a lot of people are either eating their turkey still or digesting it, and they've got a lot of questions to ask. So let's get there. But before we do, let's tell you about our wonderful sponsor, Betway. You can go there right now. Betway is a leading global online betting and gaming brand. Follow your gut instinct. Go with Betway. You can get the SKU right there in front of you. Or you can just go over to the website right now. And remember, you must be 18 plus and always gamble responsibly. And, there's already some games in the books. So I have to look at the night games. I wasn't even looking at them, Pierre, but I'll give a quick pick. I'm 1-1 now. Let's go to that Canadiens-Penguins game in Montreal today. I'm going to take the Canadiens on the money line. They are plus 120 underdogs against the Penguins. Give me the Montreal Canadiens to knock off the Pittsburgh Penguins at the Bell Center today as my Betway pick of the day. Let's get to our Q&A. What do we got? John Smith, how good could Seamus Casey be? He's blazing. Yeah, he scored a goal.
It's unbelievable. So this is a great example of a kid taking advantage of an opportunity. Luke Hughes is hurt, and they were both teammates at University of Michigan. And now Seamus Casey at 5'9", maybe 165 pounds of playing defense in the NHL has got 3 goals. It's an amazing story. I've seen him play a ton. He's really slick. He's fast. He doesn't have the escapability, obviously, of Lane Hutson, but there are a lot of similarities in the offensive zone, but not nearly the escapability. He's an elite straight-ahead skater, though. Straight ahead, he's got powerful stride and real good quickness. I see him being a 4-5 in the NHL. I don't see him being a 1-2-3. He's a 4-5.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting, too, because I remember when I did an interview with Tom Fitzgerald late in the summer, that was a guy he mentioned when I said, give me some players to keep an eye on for fans that maybe don't know. And that was one of the guys he went right to, and he spoke volumes about him. So, all right, next question. Max R, where would you draft Hutson in a redraft? Could he turn out to be the best player in the 2022 draft?
He could, but I don't think he will. I think Slavkovsky will.
Yeah. I think Slavkovsky's right there.
Slavkovsky's pretty good, man.
He's going to be really good.
Hard to find power forwards like that with hand skills. But Lane would
go higher.
Here's what I'd say to you, to be fair to Lane. He would not be a second-round pick if he had a do-over, and he'd be a top 10 pick. And I'm going to say, based on the players, the only one I could say safely that went in the top 5 that would go ahead of him would have been Logan Cooley. And then I think so Cooley could have been a 2, and then I could see Lane going at 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere like that. But he would have been a first-round pick if he had a do-over, and he probably would have been a top 10 and probably a top 5.
I'd agree. All right, next question. Jason Logan, what's up, Jay? Happy birthday. When the Pens are on, they are on. But when they're a bit up and down, what would you do different to keep that good game streak going?
Get better defensemen.
Yeah.
You know what's and I like Marcus Pettersson a lot. I think he's a really good player, and that was a trade with Vancouver that brought, or a trade with Anaheim. I think that brought him over. But what I would say is, if you watch Mitchell Marner's goal in Toronto on Saturday night, that can't happen.
No.
Like
No.
Pettersson's better than that. He's not out there for his offense. He's out there for his defense.
Yeah.
At that time of the game, and I know everybody's supporting, and I know you got a young goaltender in Bloomquist in goal, and he lost his net a little bit. I get that. I get all, but there's no way Mitchell should even got access to the zone. That's a one-on-one. Players practice that all the time.
Yeah. And Pierre, the other thing I'd point to with the Penguins too, and there's a lot of things, but the bottom six. I mean, these guys are out there to play more defensive hockey. I see them taking a little too many chances out there offensively, and it's going back the other way quick because I don't want to put it all on the defenseman. I think they gotta get their game tightened up as well up front. So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah. All right. Next question. Randy Workman, does Pierre have a draft day that he feels proud of because he had a say on a player he wanted to draft?
Oh yeah, I got a few of them.
Yeah, he's got a few.
There was a guy that, well, I think our whole staff wanted him, but 1990 Yarmer Yager with number 5. I'll never forget the day before we had all these meetings, and at the end, and I was just starting out, and I'd seen Yarmer a lot, and so had Greg Malone, to be fair, the chief scout. But a lot of the other guys in the staff hadn't seen him a lot. They just watched, tape of him. And Scotty had just started. And he says, "You better be right about this because it'd be a bad way to start with your first pick and you're bullish on the guy. If he's no good, you'll be in trouble." I said, "I'm pretty sure that I'm right." And Bugsy, Greg Malone, backed me up on it. But so that'd be one. I can tell you right now, in that draft, it's pretty amazing. Owen Nolan went 1, Peter Nedved went 2, Keith Primo went 3, Mike Ricci went 4, and then Yarmer went at 5. So that's kind of indented in my brain. I remember those. Like, that's from all those years ago. And then the other one was next year, believe it or not. And you can look at the tape on this one. I almost quit. I almost quit on the draft work because our scouts didn't want to take Marcus Naslund. We had Kovalev and Naslund right next to one another in the ratings, and I'd been over to Europe a fair bit back then and watched both players. And I thought Kovalev offensively had more upside, but I thought Naslund was a better overall player. So the Rangers took Kovalev, I think, at 15. You'd have to look it up, Jimmy. I think
I'm looking at it right now. Yep, 15.
15. And then did we have 16 or 17? I think we had
16.
16. So
yep.
we took Naslund at 16.
Yep. Do you know who went 17 in that draft?
No.
I've never even heard of him. Brent Billigou.
Oh, yeah. He was a big defenseman from Seattle. He was a big – the Montreal Canadiens took him. I know they did.
Canadiens took him.
They had Turner Stevenson. They had a whole run on kids. They had Mark Pettersson. They had Turner Stevenson, and they had Brent Bilodeau, all kids that played for Seattle in the Western Hockey League.
So they were going for size.
Well, you'd have to look at it, Jimmy. Now, Washington Capitals took a player not long after Pittsburgh.
Trevor Halverson.
Yeah, that's who it was. He played for North Bay. And right, just check it out. I think he played for North Bay.
Yeah.
And we had a big, not FU fight at the table. That's too strong a term. But we had a big verbal joust after the Rangers took Kovalev. And that's the one, just to Randy's question, where I was like, we better take Naslund, because if we don't, and they wanted to take Trevor Halverson, a lot of the scouts, because they hadn't seen Naslund play. So that's the one where I'd say I was so mad. I looked at Scotty and said, if they don't take him, I'm not coming back. He's like, sit down and calm down, you idiot. So I sat down and calmed down. And then Craig Patrick took him, which was good.
And I got to ask, though, why did they trade him eventually?
I'll tell you why. And this shows you why you got to be so careful. I went to Hartford. Scotty Bowman went to Detroit. Harry Smith went to Detroit. And different people came into the organization that really didn't have the same feelings toward Marcus as maybe we did. And so he got traded, and the guy he got traded for, his name, and he was a good player. His name is Alex Stoyanov. You can look it up.
I know.
It was a big battle between college and major junior back then for Alex Stoyanov. He was a big power forward, and he was tough as nails, really tough. And Vancouver had a lot of tough guys back then, if you remember. Pat Quinn really believed you had to have toughness, and he had a lot of tough guys.
Right.
And so he needed some skill to go with Perrain, to go with Trevor Linden and all those guys. So that's how that – and Pittsburgh wasn't tough enough because all the guys had moved on.
Yeah.
Well, that's why that deal happened. It was a very bad – Craig Patrick, I'm telling you right now, I work for the man I every day. I respect him every day. He didn't make a lot of mistakes. He would probably be the first person.
Sure, he'd tell you the same. Yeah, I would imagine. All right, next question. Jason Logan, Pierre, in your time being around the NHL, is anything more crazy than you seen the Jets pulling their goalie in the first with a few seconds to go the other night?
No,
I'm glad somebody brought that up because I was gonna when I forgot.
So I was watching that, okay, and good for O'Neill. Usually, not all, you'd have to win it clean. If you can score a goal in less than 3 seconds off a face-off in your own zone, it's because you won it clean. The other team didn't have a retrieval plan. So it was 2.9 seconds, I think.
Yep.
And, here's the thing on that goal. Lowry wins a face-off clean. Like, he wins that face-off completely and utterly clean. And, it ends up at the back of the net, I think, in about a second and a bit, a second point two or something like that. But you can't, if you're the opposition centerman, you can't lose that draw clean.
No.
Like, you cannot. So, Minnesota, I think it was Matt Boldy. It was Matt Boldy took the face-off.
Yeah.
And hey, Jimmy, that kid's off to a great start. Like,
yeah, he is.
Great.
We were saying he needed a good bounce back.
Yeah, and you're right. You actually said it, and you're right on. But Jimmy, Boldy lost that face-off clean, and you cannot that's a great lesson, and I'm sure they'll show that to all the young kids in the organization and to take the guy's stick. You cannot lose that draw clean. Make it a scramble draw, and nothing happens.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure.
The question was, had I ever seen anything that crazy? The answer is yes.
Okay.
He had already clinched a playoff spot in Pittsburgh, and we were playing the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
And Scotty wanted to just keep everybody sharp, and he wanted us to work on our puck possession. So we were actually changing our goalies during play in a game.
Wow.
And at the time, it was Kenny Reagan. I'm going to say it was Kenny Reagan and Tommy Barrasso. And we would tell the guys, okay, we're changing now, so own the puck. And we would play keep away with the puck so we could change our goalies on the fly.
That's awesome. Good old Scotty. That's great stuff.
He was so far ahead of everybody else, Jimmy. So far ahead. So far ahead.
All right, next question. Ron LaRoque. Do you think MSL is just a stopgap for the next coach? He speaks well, but listening to Tony and his guests, it sounds like he's not growing with the team. I like him. He means Tony Marinaro. I like him, but I don't know.
Oh, I don't think he's a stopgap. I think he's a keeper. I remember this story. It's a good one too, Ron. Bob Gainey, when he had Ken Hitchcock down in Dallas, after I think his first or second year, he said, Ken, you're a really good coach, but if you don't learn how to adapt to our players better, you're going to be a 2-year coach rather than a 10-year coach. And I think you'd rather be a 10-year coach. And Gainey was spot on because Hitchcock had to change a little bit. They ended up winning the Cup in '99. They had an amazing run with Ken coaching there, going to the final again against New Jersey, playing against Detroit and against Colorado and all those huge series back then. But he listened to Bob Gainey. And I would say that Marty St. Louis doesn't have to have that conversation with his bosses. They're all singing from the same songbook. And I think Marty, we talk about John Tortorella on the show a lot out of respect. Marty learned a lot from John.
Mm-hmm.
He learned a lot about what to do most of the time and what not to do some of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he learned a lot from John. I really do.
Yep. I think the only thing I was concerned about, and I want to credit him, and I think he's maturing as a coach in this respect, for getting better, is that he was almost at times, and I get it, you have a young team, you're a new coach, At times I felt, Pierre, like maybe he's being a little too player friendly. And there were times where but I'm not behind closed doors. I'm just saying what I see from the outside. And maybe there were times where he needed to lay the law down a bit. But by all accounts and from people I talked to with the team, he's found that balance and he's doing all right with it right now.
You know where I really took a warming to him? I remember we had probably just about started. Maybe we were a 2 months into our show. And I remember calling you up and saying, Jack, I better get sent down. Like, that's unacceptable what he did tonight. That was no good. And, he doesn't require waivers, and they got to send a message because it's going to be a long year. And they need him. But they got to teach this kid what's right and what's wrong. And the next day he got sent down. And when Marty did that with the help of, obviously, management, I thought it was really smart. And so that's when he grew on me as a
There you
coach.
go. Yep. All right, next question. Richard Gagne, after putting up 4 goals on Swayman and Allmark, would still consider the Habs to have scoring depth problems? No, but I didn't consider him that way when we entered this season, Richard, with all due respect. I thought scoring would be one of their attributes. I was more worried about team defense.
I still think they're going to have problems scoring because their bottom 6 not going to score enough. There's going to be injuries as we go along, especially with some of the smaller players. One of the positive things from Saturday night was Newhook's shot. I thought, that's a big-time goal at that time. And so do I think they're going to be a juggernaut offensively? No. Do I think they can get to 250-plus goals, which is really the Mendoza line for making the playoffs or not making it? I think they can. But Cole's going to have a huge year. Slavkovsky's going to have a huge year. They're going to have Newhook get to 20 to 25 goals. Like, start doing the math. They're still a ways away. And the power play, Jimmy's got to be over 23% or higher. If it's not, they're not going to score enough goals.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, next question. Question from Randy Workman. What's up, Randy? What are the chances Kamenko and Mantha are gone at the deadline because they are free agents? It's a good question.
Good question, Eric. How about Calgary off to a 3-0 start? That's pretty amazing. And you know what? I give Mantha a lot of credit. And I think he knows he's in a contract year because you can see he's playing a lot of vim, vigor, and vitality that we didn't see in Detroit and we didn't see for good portions of his time, obviously, in Washington. But I would say
this is it for him. It's do or die this year.
Do or die for him. Kuzmenko, I think they might try to keep him there.
I do too.
They might try to keep him.
It's weird. I've heard his name a lot, Pierre, and I guess that's why. Thanks for pointing that out, Randy. I was unaware he was a potential UFA, but he's fitting in out well with what they're trying to do there. And again, Pierre, you said it off the top of the show, and I want to echo it. Credit to Ryan Husker for the start that those Calgary Flames have had. They really have. It's been amazing. All right. I think we've got one more question left. Morantz. The NHL now has the first assistant coach, first female assistant coach. Which team is next to hire a female assistant coach? Any names out there that you're aware of? I have not heard anything yet.
I don't know anything about that. I did an interview today for the ECAC with Matt DeRocher, who I think is one of the top 5 female coaches in the league, coaching women's hockey. I think Mark Johnson, I should say, at Wisconsin is the best female coach in the country when it comes to women's hockey. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of really good ones. Chris Wells at St. Lawrence, Doug Darrow at Cornell. There's so many good ones. Mark Bolding at Yale. There are a lot of good coaches at the U.S. college level. I don't know who the next female pro coach is. I wish I did know. I just don't know. And I'll try to get better at that, but I don't know at this point.
And, for those interested in, the emergence of women's hockey, both at the pro and college level, I highly suggest checking out the interview we did with the commissioner of the ECAC, Doug Christensen, on Friday. A big thanks to him again. It was very educational, and it shows you just how far, specifically in his conference, that the women's game has come and where it's going from here. So
yeah, I agree, Jimmy. That's a really good point. Really good point, Jimmy.
Good stuff. All right. I think that's it. That's all we got for questions here. It was a great questions today, as always. Really big thanks out to Ryan. He was awesome. It was so fun talking hockey with him again. I miss him a lot. One of my favorite people from when I was in Montreal. Big thanks to Shane working in the studio. I know he's working on a holiday and everybody else is enjoying their dinners. So big thanks to Shane for coming up in the clutch. And always thanks to you, Pierre. And tomorrow, we don't have a guest yet, but we'll work on something.
Hello.
Think of something. We'll think of something, but enjoy the rest of the hockey tonight. Big game in Montreal. The Penguins and Canadians enjoy that. And until tomorrow, this has been another edition of the Eye Test on the Sick Podcast Network.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.